Good morning. I'm Richard Benefield. I'm Deputy Director of the Fine Arts Museums of San Francisco, and I'm the organizer of the exhibition and catalog David Hockney, A Bigger Exhibition. Thank you. I just also want to acknowledge that my great collaborator in this project, Gregory Evans, the curator and designer of the exhibition, is with us today, sitting right here in the almost front row. And I would like for you to join me in welcoming Lawrence to the podium. Thank you.
Hello. So glad to have you here. I wanted to start, by the way, how many of you here were here last night? Yeah. There was something going on last night that you were not aware of that I want to talk about for a few seconds. The last speaker last night, Margaret Wertheim, in your program notes, you'll remember, she gave an amazing little talk at the very end. And she is the director of the Institute for Figuring, which is one of the gems of Los Angeles. It is part of the Association of Marginal Institutions, which includes the Metabolic Lab and the Museum of Jurassic Technology, and the Center for Land Use Information, and so forth. And 2 hours before she spoke, she heard that her museum had basically, there'd been a fire upstairs, and terrible smoke damage, there's some water damage, mainly smoke damage, but apparently very serious. She wanted to be here today and can't be. But what I want to say is that the Institute for Figuring is one of the most amazing places around. You can go to their website, which is theiff.org, and see the sort of work that they do. And some of you may know about some of it. So if you go and you enter their site, and then you go, for example, to exhibitions, they are the people who are doing the crocheted coral reef that you might have heard about, which is, it's kind of the global, it's the global warming equivalent of the AIDS quilt. 7,000 people around the world have been, well, let's just look at some of them. If you look at that, for example, that is crocheted. All this stuff is crocheted. It's an amazing project. They also, if you go back to the, let me go back, and just look at the range of exhibitions. I'm just trying to find some other stuff. Online exhibitions. They basically work at the intersection of science and art. They're amazing, amazing people, and they are now facing the crisis. They're in an existential crisis. They were a shoestring operation to begin with, and if you go to About, you can see where it says donate. It is tax-free, and if you go to theiff.org, and I know this is coming on December, this is when you make all your own donations. This is an emergency. This is where the art world sticks together and saves its own. This is the kind of Amish Mennonite tradition of we all get together, we build the barn that's been burnt down. And so I leave that for you. And I just wanted to stop and say that. Okay, so let me figure out how I'm going to get out of here, and I'm going to go here. Okay, so with that, by the way, they're going to be okay. They're going to get out of this, but it's going to be difficult for a little bit. Summarizing where we are. Yesterday, we had a whole series of talks about David Hockney's contention and the evidence for it, and some other artists working in the same terrain, that since all the way back to 1430 with Van Eyck and Brunelleschi, artists were using various optical devices, whether it was mirrors or curved mirrors or lenses, cameras obscuras, cameras lucida, and so forth, that enforced a certain kind of look. Not all art was using it all the time, but there was a look that became predominant. And if you go to the show, and by the way, there'll be a lunch break, you can go through the show and so forth, you will see he has his great wall where he basically shingled a wall he put a color Xerox machine in his studio and shingled the wall with imagery from 1430 to 1900. or 1920, I think even, or actually it starts before that, it starts in 1350, and it's Northern European above, Southern European below, and if you look at that thing, there is something that happens in 1430 that is unmistakable. It happens from one decade to the next. Suddenly, artists go from kind of a flat, awkward kind of style of drawing. It's as if Europe puts on its spectacles. And you'll see it, it's quite amazing. So during the break, go look at that. And that is the look that predominates. We're not saying that every artist used it, but the example I gave yesterday is that David talks about if you talk to a 5-year-old and you say to them, draw me a picture of your house, they will draw you the front, the back, the doghouse, the trees, the forest, the pool, everything. And the teacher then comes in and says, no, you're doing it wrong. You couldn't see all that from one place. To do it right, you have to do it effectively, as if you were standing on one leg with one eye closed and not moving at all. And that is what is called right. And the reason that's called right is that's the optical look. That is one-point perspective, and that is the look that has predominated in the European tradition up till 1839 for painters. And at that point, once photography took it on, it continued to predominate in the world, but for painters, they were able to fall away, and you got Impressionism, Expressionism, things like that. But the point, so yesterday we talked that whole thing over. Today, we want to consider David's claim that that vice of one-point perspective is our problem. And we're not just talking about art and painting. We're talking about nuclear war, global warming, all sorts of things. The inability to see multiple perspectives and the claim that wider perspectives are needed now, which is another way of articulating what the Cubist claim was, that you have to see things from multiple perspectives simultaneously and so forth. That is an existential claim at this point. So that's what we're going to talk about today. And the way it's going to work is that this morning we're going to have a group of artists that I've selected who are playing with different ways of doing wider perspectives. One of the ways you know that David's doing it is when you go see the show, he has those 18-screen video grids that are quite amazing. So we have other artists doing similar sorts of work or works that are in the same terrain this morning. We'll take a lunch break, then we'll come back. I'll give a little talk as opposed to what I've just done. Then we will have the views on all this from Hollywood and from Silicon Valley. And then we'll all get together and have a conversation at the end. And there's a bunch of chairs back there. These are here just notionally for the time being to give you a sense that at some point there will be a conversation. But for right now, we're going to start with 4 artists, or 5 actually, come to think of it. The first are a pair of identical twins, Trevor and Ryan Oakes, who will describe to you the work behind. Did some of you notice those concave things up there? Do you understand those are done freehand? No equipment, that's them just drawing with their hands. They have figured out a way, as you'll see in a second, to do camera obscura-like drawing with no equipment except their eyes. Anyway, so we'll hear from them. Then we're going to hear from Gail White, who's an artist at Stanford, and she's doing multi-screen, among other things, multi-screen things of, you won't think this is cool, but it's insanely cool, mold growing. Trust me, it's fantastic. And then I'm going to present something that Adam Curtis did. He can't be here. I'll tell you about that. And then we're going to end with Daniel Crooks, who's here from Australia. But so with no further ado, and as I say, the bios are in your thing, Trevor and Ryan Oakes.